Welcome to the Daily Dose. Today is March 1st, 2019. I came across this report today on Project Veritas, which is the website and operation run by James O'Keefe, in which he goes on to describe how Facebook has been systematically suppressing content that has been released by right-wing pages, media outlets, personalities, in order to prevent that content from reaching a broader audience. He actually describes certain practices and even algorithms that are set in place in order to suppress this content. He describes one in particular called deboosting, which is essentially a shadow ban, where when a certain media personality or a page or a personality or a content provider puts out content, such as a live stream, that stream is not announced to the page followers or the friends or whatever. And as a result, it does not reach as broad an audience as maybe the number of followers would suggest that it should. They've also gone on to flag certain accounts and certain pages as being targeted for deboosting, I guess you should say. And this has all been documented and relayed by a former Facebook engineer who now works for Project Veritas. They also have some leaked documents from people who still do work at Facebook describing these practices and trying to enforce these practices. So some of the channels actually specified in this article are from people like Mike Cernovich, Mark Dice, Lauren Chen, otherwise known as Roaming Millennial, Stephen Crowder, who's a very conservative comedian, and so forth and so on. So this article serves to reinforce the point that Facebook has been systematically targeting right-wing content providers as a sort of a broader campaign against conservatives in this country. And by implication, this also applies to other major social media platforms in Silicon Valley, such as Twitter and YouTube and so forth. So my take on this is, well, where's the news here? I mean, don't we already know this? Don't we already know this is going on? Isn't this already common knowledge by now that the major social media platforms in Silicon Valley systematically target the right-wing groups, just like the mainstream media does? That's why you're seeing more and more of an incestuous relationship between the mainstream media and Silicon Valley social media startups. Well, not really startups anymore, but platforms. YouTube is a great example. The more that we see mainstream media influence on YouTube, the more that we see conservative right-wing or alt-right channels being pushed out, systematically censored, suppressed, whatever. And Facebook is just another manifestation of that. And so there's no reason why any of this should be a surprise if you've been paying attention long enough. Now, of course, Facebook is going to push out right-wing and alt-right media voices and channels and pages, because that runs counter to their interests and their partnerships with the left and basically the people and the entities that control the narrative in this country. And as that partnership gets tighter and tighter and grows stronger and stronger between the two, the people left out of the equation are the alt-right and just conservatives in general. I would say the only exception to that is Twitter, where the Donald Trump's heavy usage of the platform actually ended up being quite a benefit to Twitter, which was pretty much dying at the time. But I think the 2016 election single-handedly kept Twitter in the mainstream. So what's the main takeaway here? What do we do about this? How do we handle this situation? Well, it's important to recognize that Facebook, it's not a public utility. So I'm seeing more and more channels on YouTube and personalities on YouTube argue that Facebook should be regulated like as if it were a public utility. One good example is Sticks and Hammer, who strongly supports legislation to control these social media groups as if they were a utility like an electricity company or a water company. I think this is misguided. We don't want more government intervention here. We want less. really the answer is the right wing and the alt-right needs to take control of the narrative somehow. They need to recruit more people who are capable of building platforms like BitChute, like Gab AI, like Minds.com, and to take control of the mechanisms through which these narratives are established. That may seem daunting, obviously it is, but it happens. It seems like every 10, 15 years or so, there's a new establishment order. There's a new king of the hill. For a while, Microsoft was the king of the personal computing platform, and then right around early 2000s, Apple took over, and now Apple is in everyone's personal computer world. Every 10, 12, 15 years, there's a new thing on top. And Facebook, in fact, is actually on the decline. Most people younger than a certain age don't really use Facebook anymore. So I think Facebook is starting to go in that direction as well. Now, of course, they've made certain investments and acquired other outlets like Instagram to maintain their positions. That was a very, very wise purchase of theirs. But the point is, there's no reason why, with proper planning and proper foresight, the next major platform couldn't be an alt-right or more of a conservative-run platform. The main objective here, the main goal here, is to prevent mainstream media influence from poisoning that platform. So let's say Minds.com or BitChute becomes very, very, very widespread to the point of it's competing with Facebook, for example. Well, at that point, there are going to be mainstream media influencers who want to get in on that and use that to distribute their message, their narrative. And the people who run Gab AI or BitChute have to maintain their integrity and prevent that from happening. And that's really the only answer here. That's really it. There's no way legislation is going to be the answer here. Regulation is not the answer here. Facebook is going to do what Facebook is going to do. YouTube is going to do what YouTube is going to do. And anyone who thinks they can control that through regulation is simply not paying attention. Honestly, it's just a fool. That's it. So really the answer is the people like Mike Cernovich, like Mark Dice, like Gavin McInnes, sort of the premier voices of the alt-right. They have to recruit other people who can develop the platforms to establish the narrative. They can't just keep on using the same platforms as the left. That's a sucker's game. That's really a foolish move. And that's where they're making a mistake. Now, same thing happened to Patreon. Patreon felt too much influence from the mainstream media. They wanted to cozy up with the mainstream media, so they started cutting off all these right-wing platforms. And that's what's going to happen. That's the natural progression of these things. So if the right wing is really serious about this, if the alt-right is really serious about this, they have to recruit people to build the platforms that can establish the narrative. It may sound like a daunting task, and of course it is. It's challenging, but it can be done with proper planning and proper foresight. And rather than just complaining about the current platforms who are not on their side, and they're pretty overt about saying so, they need to start developing their own solutions and their own alternatives. So we're going to continue seeing more stories like this. And obviously, not obviously, but if anyone is surprised to those people, I say, what are you paying attention to? What are you watching? How do you not know this already? If you've been watching all this and you're genuinely surprised that Facebook censors alt-right content, well, then frankly, you're just not a very smart person. And that's all I can say in response to people like that. So that's my take. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next Daily Dose.